controlled by multiple different Orthodox parts of the Catholic Church and Christian Church. The churches couldn't even agree on who was going to maintain this holiest.
But they're able to do it together.
They kind of do it together. It took them a long time to do it. So it's a reminder that even within Christianity, there was that much differentiation, that they battled each other. Now we're moving outside of that, trying to find ways to work as Christians, Jews, and Muslims. It's a massive problem to tackle. And going to Jerusalem, you mentioned it, Abby, when you're on the Golan Heights, you're looking over Lebanon and Hezbollah and ISIS-controlled territory. You go to Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, there's a lot of contention in the Gaza Strip, effectively a terror state. They're living on top of each other with imminent threats, and that makes every decision they make not academic, but life or death.
You know, Chris, I imagine you're also a GOP strategist along with having being an Iraqi war vet. I imagine this is making Republicans feel a little bit better over the last 3 days than they have over the last 7.
I mean, the president is really a strong leader. I mean, I think that the Republican Party needed the energy with this election and everything he's doing, and being over there on the world stage, it's really his first opportunity to really, I mean, he was a successful with the election, but he's really being stately, and I think that he's over there setting the expectation and making clear killing for religion is unnecessary, and some of the messaging on this trip has been very strong. And you know, he's a strong leader, and I think this is a good moment for his presidency, and we're going to go on from here.
Well, what does this do? We haven't talked nearly as much as we should about this. What does this do for our military? You think about everyone watching this trip play out, but the most important members of our community fighting for our freedoms every day. What are they taking away, you think, from this trip? The fact that he chose these 3 major religions as his first international trip, and he's coming down so hard on something that they all are going to face, terrorism.
This is really good for our military and our military's families, because now they have there's a goal, there's a vision, there's leadership, there's American exceptionalism along with a really strong alliance solidarity, which is what we need to go forward. Having help with our Arab friends, our Sunni Arab friends, we know we're going to get help against fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which are still out there. We know we're going to get help against surrounding what Iran is doing, and they know that when they go there, everything with arming the Kurds, a lot of my friends that are special operators, SEALs, and Army Marines have been saying the problem is we couldn't get the Kurds the weapons the right way, even though they're the ones that we want fighting ISIS because of the Iranian-backed militias are doing it now, and if we try to arm the Kurds through the Shia, they're not going to get the weapons they need. But now that this is all happening, the military is getting the leadership they want, they have the vision they want, and that, like I said, that trickles even back to the family from around at home, because they know that the men and women going over are doing something for a purpose.
But not only that, they also know there's another $24 billion in the budget for defense, and that goes quickly, let alone the normal budget that goes in. So that gets hopefully goes to the right people. And I also think it's important that I think when you guys tell me, and Chris, you want to weigh in, that the generals, the Secretary of Defense is actually making defense decisions. You have the National Security Advisor is a former general, and where the staff of the last administration was making a lot of the military decisions, I think a lot of the military seems to feel better that it's actually in the hands of a general.
What they're also doing, too, is that not only is the Secretary of Defense making decisions, he's delegating to other ground force commanders, other battle space owners to do the decisions they know because they're intimately involved. They're using the chain of command properly, and there are very, very few staffers.
They're not calling it from CENTCOM in Tampa.
No, they're giving the authority. Even with the big Moab that went off a few weeks back, that's a combatant commander that did it. That's not coming from the White House, but it's delegated from the White House.
All right, let's listen in as the President of the United States approaches the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
So this is another ceremonial portion where I think the president is getting briefed on what's about to happen as they make their way down in the Christian region of this church.
Yeah, let's bring back in Rob O'Neill, Pete Hegseth, and of course Professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor, talk to us about the significance for the Israelis and the Christian community as they visit this church in this moment?
Well, it's very significant because when Jordan controlled the old city of Jerusalem, people couldn't go and pray freely. Jews couldn't pray at the Western Wall. Jews couldn't go and visit the Church of the Sepulcher or walk on the Via Dolorosa. Now, of course, with Jerusalem in the hands of Israel, it's an open city. Anybody can go there and anybody can pray. And it creates such harmony between Jews, Catholics, Protestants, Muslims. And I think the president visiting the Church of the Sepulcher freely and openly and then visiting the Western Wall sends a very, very important symbol of why Jerusalem must remain under the control and sovereignty of Israel. It's the only way to guarantee religious freedom for all.
Professor, explain to us, while we look at this, and this is clearly part of his Israeli visit, the Palestinians also claim the Old City, which is where this is, with its Jewish, Muslim, and Christian sacred sites, as part of their future capital of a Palestinian state. So how's that working out?
Well, it's doable. Look, we live in New York City here. We have boroughs. We have Brooklyn, where I grew up, and Queens and Manhattan. You can have a situation where Jerusalem has a Jewish capital in West Jerusalem and in the Old City, and then in East Jerusalem, it could have a Palestinian capital if the Palestinians would finally make peace and give up some of their absurd demands about some right of return and accept the peace offer that was made by President Clinton back in 2001, by Olmert in 2008. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said both sides have to make painful compromises. If that were to be done, I think Jerusalem could easily be resolved. It must remain a united city, open to everybody, but it can have a capital in East Jerusalem for the Palestinians and a capital in West Jerusalem. And I hope that very soon the United States Embassy will move to West Jerusalem, and perhaps some kind of an embassy or symbolic building can be built in East Jerusalem that represents the American presence in the area that is Palestinian and will become Palestinian if there's a two-state solution.
You know, it's just reminded me, too, is in seeing Ivanka and Jared Kushner,
I was just thinking
that she converted. She converted to Judaism, so this is very special for her. And now I believe someone's making an address. Either that or that's an audio-less picture.
As they take a photo up, but as you mentioned, Ivanka Trump and his son-in-law, being Jared Kushner, as you can see right by his side throughout this trip, is Jewish and has clearly been. Let's listen.
Can't tell if that's just some of the people near the photographers or part of the official event. Pete, they're posing in front of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre door. I don't believe there are live pictures inside. What are they going to go in and take a look at?
They would go in and they would see the traditional, what is a representation of historically believed to potentially be the site of the crucifixion, as well as the burial site of Jesus. So a lot of dispute about exactly where things happened, but this is where it has historically been.
I believe it was just excavated recently, right? For the first time.
Multiple renovations. You know, through the Crusades, through the decades and the centuries, a lot of different people have occupied and controlled it. So you've got a lot of different layers within that.
This is also personal to him, as we've been talking about, Professor. When you have a son-in-law who is Jewish, he's clearly learned so much more about the Jewish religion. I mean, this is something that he's very close to. How much has that impacted him and being here in Israel in this moment?
Well, I think he's learned a lot about the Jewish religion, living in New York, having a Jewish son-in-law, a Jewish daughter. The interesting thing about the Church of the Sepulchre, too, is there's a Palestinian presence there. The key to the church has been in a Palestinian family for many years, because all the Christian sects, they didn't trust each other originally, and they gave the key to a Palestinian family that has held that key now for several hundred years. So here the church again represents the greatest symbol of all religions coming together, and I think the president wanted to make that point, that religions can live together as long as they reject terrorism and violence.
Sure. Professor, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, during this 36-hour visit to Israel, he suggested that he would love to make the ultimate deal. But ultimately, the expectations are very low for any sort of a breakthrough, right?
No, I think their expectations are low for a general deal that will solve all the problems quickly. I think what we may see, and the president might be very good at this, is a step-by-step approach. Let's first open up the Saudis and the Emirates to Israeli business and telephones and airlines. Let's have the Israelis take certain steps that would satisfy the Saudis. Then let's take a next step and a next step. And I think the goal is perhaps in a few years to bring about a peace, and as part of that, the American embassy will move to Jerusalem, and then all the other embassies around the world will move to Jerusalem as well. So I think a step-by-step progress toward peace is welcome, but I have to emphasize again, Israel's a democracy. You can't tell it to do anything. You have to persuade the people to agree. There's even a law now in Israel that says Israel can't give back the territories in the West Bank without there being a referendum.
But
So the president has to speak to the Israeli people.
Is the prime minister in a strong political position right now?
I would say he is in a position in which he is strong if he makes a security-based peace, but he has his right wing pressing him very hard on the settlements, and I think it's not as easy. If Prime Minister Netanyahu could just make peace without having to get the approval of anybody else, the way the dictatorships in the area could do that, I think he would do it very quickly. I think the fact that Israel is a complex democracy with a strong right wing, with a left wing, with centrists, with a vibrant free press, which is very critical, makes it somewhat difficult. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, like Donald Trump, has his own issues. He's under investigation for trivial things, I think, taking cigars and champagne, but nonetheless there's an investigation. And in both cases, we're trying to see the criminalization of policy differences. It's wrong when it happens in Israel. It's wrong when it happens in the United States. It was wrong when it happened with Hillary Clinton. So as a civil libertarian, I'm always against trying to make crimes out of disagreements. Let's look at the statute books, and if there's no crime, there shouldn't be criminal investigations.
But as you said, Professor, if he can get even just a small part of some deal done, that could be a huge moment. It could be a great big first step. Then what is that first step?
He's optimistic.
I'm more skeptical. We spent time on the ground. It feels like the two-state solution is a thing of the past, and that this, in some sort of a more stable status quo with security arrangements, is more likely.
Yeah, but has he said two states in the past?
Who has?
Trump basically sidelined the two states.
Exactly. It is effectively sidelined. And this idea that there's going to be an East and West Jerusalem controlled by East, I also think is made more and more difficult by the realities on the ground. These holy sites represent both an example of what could be, but also the depth of the theological differences that underpin why this is so problematic to do. Many have holy and divine claims to these sites that they believe are theirs and will be theirs in perpetuity. So a claim to one Jerusalem as a united capital is a claim that both sides make. Take Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank. Israel never wants to give that up. The Palestinians say they want it. And there's no history that the Palestinians, Hamas, and others are prepared to control a peaceful state. They've only descended into terrorism when they control them.
But Professor Dershowitz, you say rather than a grand deal, just boom, we got it. It's going to be incremental. It's going to be baby steps. And that way, they'll find a way forward for peace between the two nations.
And I also think that when the Palestinians get better economic situation and have a greater stake in peace. Remember, the wall in Berlin wasn't brought down by President Reagan. It was brought down by the East Berliners who wanted to be like West Berlin. And I think when the Gaza people want to be like West Bank and they see the West Bank thriving, if the West Bank can thrive and everything turned into what Ramallah looks like today, I think the elements for peace will be on the ground. And I think Donald Trump understands that as a businessman, that giving economic security and stability to the Palestinians will make them more willing to make peace and try to live a good life instead of becoming and encouraging and incentivizing suicide bombers. Remember, the Palestinians still pay suicide bombers extra money to blow up Israeli children, and that has to stop.
Saddam Hussein was doing that. We stopped that, but not this. Listen, guys, let's stick around. Let's take a short time out and come back as the president reemerges eventually from the church, and then we can continue with him on his journey through Israel for the next 28 to 36 hours.